Good morning, dear students. Today we shall read and reflect the chapter titled The Price of Flowers, Unit 2, Lesson 2. The Price of Flowers is an excellent short story by Prabhat Kumar Mukhopadhyay. Prabhat Kumar Mukhopadhyay was an Indian Bengali writer. He was a renowned Indian writer, popular for his short stories. He was born in Hooghly, West Bengal, and he wrote especially in Bengali. He was a younger contemporary of Rabindranath Tagore, and it's Tagore who inspired him to write short stories and novels. He was both a short story writer and a novelist. His stories are mainly based on real life situations or based on real people, places, events, and his characters belong to the middle class. Their hopes, aspirations, joys, and sorrows are finely woven into his stories. So his stories are based on real life situations and real people. And mostly you could see middle class people in his stories. And his characters, the characters of his stories unfold many layers of human personality. The Price of Flowers is the best example of such a beautiful short story. Actually, this story was written in Bengali. I said that Prabhat Kumar Mukhopadhyay was a Bengali writer and he writes in Bengali. So our story titled The Price of Flowers also was written in Bengali. And the story has been translated into English by another writer, Leela Roy. So we are reading a translated version of a Bengali story. Okay. Now coming to the story, The Price of Flowers. In The Price of Flowers, Prabhat Kumar Mukhopadhyay admirably portrays the life of a poor English family. He portrays the life of a poor English family, the life of a little English girl named Maggie and her widowed mother. See, let's think about the theme of the story in detail. Actually, this story is about the depth of human relationship. The bonds of human relationship are very strong most often. They are so complex that it is difficult for us to explain. Words and deeds have a soothing effect and they cement the bonds of relationship. Don't you agree? Yes. Words have a healing influence. Words have a healing power. Here is a story about the impact of the healing power of kind words. So this is one of the themes of the story. The healing power of good words. Again, we have various other themes like the hardships of the poor people, the unfulfilled desires and dreams of ordinary people, superstitious behavior. Moreover, it is a story about the love of a little girl for her dead brother. This story, Price of Flowers, takes place in London. The story is set in England, in London, and the time is in the pre-independence era, before Indian independence. The story happens in the pre-independence era and it takes place in London. The style of narration has been very simple. Narration is very simple and it's written in simple usage language. Very simple language used is lucid and easy to understand. It is written in first person narrative. It is written in first person narrative. You could see I inside the story, which means one of the characters of this story itself is the narrator here. Okay, or it is narrated through the point of view of one of the characters. It's narrated through the point of view of our narrator, and the narrator is Mr. Gupta. Mr. Gupta is one of the main characters of the story. Okay, so it's narrated from the point of view of Mr. Gupta, who is one of the main characters of the story, and therefore it is written in first person narrative. Mr. Gupta, it's very clear from his name itself that he is an Indian. Story happens in London, but the narrator of the story is an Indian civil servant. Narrator is an Indian civil servant undergoing his training in London. So the narrator is Mr. Gupta, who is a civil servant, Indian civil servant, who is now in London. He meets a teenaged English girl named Maggie at a London restaurant. He meets a teenaged English girl named Maggie. She is actually addressed in the story as Maggie, but her actual name is Alice Margaret Clifford. Slowly, Mr. Gupta befriended Maggie and he becomes a guardian to Maggie and her family. See, the story is moved forward through the dialogues among the three main characters of the story. You could see in the story a dialogue between the three main characters. And who are the three main characters of the story? The narrator, Mr. Gupta, Maggie, English girl, and her mother, Mrs. Clifford. So three main characters of the story are Mr. Gupta, who is an Indian civil servant now in London. The second person is Maggie or Alice Margaret Clifford, who is a poor English girl. And the third person is her mother, Mrs. Clifford. You could also come across one more character who is Frank. And Frank is Maggie's brother, who is posted as a soldier in India. So these are the main characters of the story. And no person with a compassionate heart can end reading the story without shedding a tear. So story is that much a touching story. And after reading the story, we feel like shedding tears. Now let's come to the main characters of the story. The most important character is that little poor English girl, Maggie. The character of Maggie in the story, is drawn in an exemplary manner. Alice Margaret Clifford, addressed as Maggie, is a poor English girl of 13 or 14 with her large, sad eyes, wearing shabby clothes, living in an uncomfortable house with her old, widowed mother, working in a shop, in a civil service shop for small wages, is portrayed exquisitely. She is an utterly poor girl who can afford to have a decent meal or a decent lunch only on her payday. That is on Saturday when she receives her weekly payment. Who had dire need to every shilling that life threw her way. So Maggie is from such a very poor background. She is living with her old widowed mother, who is her only guardian. Actually, she is working as a typist in a store, and she works very hard to make the ends meet. And she has got a brother, and his name is Frank or Francis. Frank is posted in India. He is a soldier and he is in British India. She has a brother who is serving as a soldier in British India. And Frank is posted in Punjab in India. But unfortunately, you could see that towards the climax of the story, Frank is killed while fighting on the northwest frontier. Okay, so as Frank was there in India, and Maggie and Maggie's mother, Mrs. Clifford, they were a little superstitious. And also they were having some false impressions about India. So they thought that India was a country of tigers, snakes, and fevers. So Mrs. Clifford, Maggie's mother, was so much anxious and worried about the safety of her son, who was in India. Her son was in military service in India, so she was so much worried about her son's safety. And they were in search of an Indian. Actually, they were in search of an Indian because they were not having any news about Frank for a few months. So they want to meet an Indian to inquire about India. So at that right time, Maggie meets an Indian named Mr. Gupta at an English restaurant. Okay, so Maggie meets this Indian, and Gupta is actually the narrator of the story, and Gupta slowly becomes the guardian of Maggie and her family. So you could see this girl doing lot many things for her family. Her inquisitive nature, her ideas about India, her superstition, her love for her brother and mother, etc., are powerfully pictured inside the story. Her decency, her refinement, and truthfulness, coupled with innocence and sincerity, are praiseworthy. She is such a hardworking little girl, and she is doing lot many things for her family to protect her mother, who is totally sick, old, and widowed, and a widow. Okay. See, and finally, towards the end of the story, when Frank was killed, Frank was killed while fighting on the northwest frontier. She gives Mr. Gupta a coin, a shilling of her hard-earned money to buy flowers. And he asked Mr. Gupta to put them on her brother's tomb. Her brother was buried there in the northwest frontier, in a place named Dera Khasi Khan. So she asked Mr. Gupta to visit that place and to put some flowers on her brother's grave. And Maggie gives Mr. Gupta a shilling, a coin, and that coin was a hard-earned money, shilling from her hard-earned money to buy flowers, and she asked Mr. Gupta to place them on her brother's grave. So her willingness to sacrifice her only shilling, her hard-earned money, for the sake of her brother symbolizes Maggie's true love for her brother. On the whole, Maggie is a pure soul with a charismatic personality. Her love towards her brother and devotion to her mother are praiseworthy. She is very, very responsible, then hardworking, affectionate with everyone, considerate for all, tender-hearted, very polite, well-mannered, disciplined, highly talented. She respects everyone, respectful, very caring, highly optimistic, having a sacrificing attitude, grateful to all, and a little bit sensitive also. So I hope now you got a sketch of the character of Maggie. Now the next character is Mrs. Clifford. Mrs. Clifford is the mother of Maggie and her brother Frank. She is also a very loving and self-sacrificing woman. She is very old, weak, and a widow. But you could see Mrs. Clifford helping Maggie. Though she is a widow, she takes care of her family with a courageous heart. She is so good at baking cakes, and the cakes are sold on the streets during Saturdays. And that is how they make their living. She is always concerned about the safety of her children. She is a little bit superstitious also. And she has got some false assumptions about India. that India is a land of snakes, tigers, and fevers. Therefore, she was afraid about the safety of her son, Frank, or Francis, who is employed in military service in India. And she is superstitious that she believes in the power of the crystal ring gifted by Frank. Frank sent a crystal ring. Frank is now in Punjab, isn't it? So Frank actually has sent a crystal ring to Maggie on her birthday. And Frank sent this crystal ring saying that it was given to him by a yogi. Yogi means a magician. And he had written that it was a magical ring. The speciality of this crystal ring is that you could see a crystal on the top of the ring. And if somebody looked into the crystal ring, thinking about a person in his mind, thinking about a person who is far away, he can see that person and what he is doing. You may just look into the crystal of the ring, you may think about a person and then keep looking into the crystal ring. You could see that person and also you could see what he is doing there. So that is the speciality of the ring. So he said that this is a special kind of a ring, a magical ring, and I got it from a yogi. And mother believed the words of Frank. Okay, so as she believed, most often they looked into the crystal ring. As there was no news about Frank for a few months, they kept looking into the ring to know more about Frank. So they looked into the crystal ring, but they never saw anything. They couldn't see anything inside the crystal ring. Actually, it was just a superstition. It was just an ordinary ring made of brass and a piece of glass. As there was no news about Frank, she fell sick. And her illness was aggravated because of her worries about her son, Frank, from whom she had not heard for long. So there was no news about Frank. Actually, she didn't know if he was alive or well. So therefore, they were in search of an Indian. Okay, and finally they met Mr. Gupta, and Mr. Gupta becomes very close to the family. Maggie requested Mr. Gupta to look into the ring and tell her mother that Frank was alive and well. So Mr. Gupta purposefully, he looked into the ring and he did accordingly, and this made Mrs. Clifford recover from her illness. So Mr. Gupta, he looked into the ring and he said a lie that he could see Frank inside the ring. And this made Mrs. Clifford recover from her illness. Okay, so it is her faith in the power of the ring that, of course, made her ill at first, and also that helped her to recover from her illness. Actually, it is her faith and belief in the power of the magical ring that made her ill, and the same faith brought her back to life. So actually, faith has got a role in the story as well. Now coming to the next main character, Mr. Gupta. Mr. Gupta is the narrator of the story. He is a learned and educated Indian gentleman who is residing in England. An Indian residing in England. Or he is an Indian civil servant undergoing training in London. And he meets Maggie in a vegetarian restaurant. He slowly befriended Maggie and her mother. He is very sincere and compassionate. he goes the extra mile to help Maggie and her mother in distress. You could see Mr. Gupta helping the family during many occasions, helping them financially even. See, when Maggie's mother asked him to look into the crystal ring and tell whether her son Frank was safe or not, he told a lie because he wanted her to recover from her illness. Then again, finally in the end, you could see when Maggie wants Mr. Gupta to place some flowers on her brother's grave when he goes to India, he promised her to visit the grave of her brother, to buy some flowers using the shilling given by her, and to place them on her grave. You could see Mr. Gupta giving Maggie the promise of placing those flowers on her brother's grave in order to make her happy. And her sacrifice brings tears to the eyes of Mr. Gupta. Here is a small summary of the story. Mr. Gupta was an Indian living in London. Once he met an English girl named Alice Margaret Clifford, who is addressed as Maggie, in a vegetarian restaurant. She was 13 years old, but was working as a typist in a nearby office. Maggie was just 13 years old, but she was working as a typist in an office, in a shop. She belonged to a poor family. Maggie belonged to an utterly impoverished English family. A poor family. She wanted to know if Gupta was an Indian. Her brother, Maggie's brother, Frank or Francis, was in military service in India. India was supposed to be a land of tigers, snakes, and fevers. So, Maggie's mother, Mrs. Clifford, was anxious about her son. She wanted to know more about India as she was worried about her son's safety. Gupta offered to go with Maggie to her house to meet her mother. He told her mother that she need not worry about her son's safety in India and that India is such a beautiful, safe country. The incredible India. When he was at Maggie's house, he was shown a crystal ring. He was given a crystal ring. He was shown a crystal ring sent by Frank. Frank had sent a ring as a birthday gift to Maggie. He sent it from India. Maggie's mother and Maggie wanted Mr. Gupta to look into the crystal ring and to say how Frank was. Actually, it was a crystal ring, and they believed that it has got some magical powers. That if you keep looking into the ring, you can see a person. You may just think about a person and you may just look into the ring and you can see that person inside the ring. So they asked Mr. Gupta to look into the ring and to say whether Frank was alive or not. But at first, Mr. Gupta told them that he wouldn't see anything inside the ring. He said it is just a ring and I couldn't see anything. But later, he became close to the family. And he became a frequent visitor to Maggie's family. And he took Maggie out several times also. He even took Maggie to a zoo and she could even ride on that giant Indian elephant, Indian Raja. Okay, so one day, Mr. Gupta received a letter from Maggie. He received news that Maggie's mother was sick. He went to their house immediately. Maggie told him that her mother was worried about her son and hence she was sick. So Maggie wanted Mr. Gupta to gaze into the crystal ring once again and say that Frank was safe. Gupta did not hesitate to tell such a lie to the mother. Mr. Gupta looked into the ring and said that he could see Frank and that Frank was happy and alive. And the mother soon became well. But later, Gupta was shocked to learn that Frank had died in the war. He died in the war. Actually, Frank was fighting there in the northwest frontier and he belonged to a regiment and that regiment was fighting on the northwest frontier and he died in the war. Okay. So Frank had actually died even before the false information was given to the mother. Mr. Gupta said that he was alive, isn't it? But already he was dead. Even before that he died. So Gupta felt very sad about it. Now it was time for Mr. Gupta to leave for India. It's time to return to India. So he was leaving for India to take up a new job there in India and he was moving to Punjab. Actually, Maggie's brother was buried there in Punjab. They got the information that her brother was buried at Fort Monroe near Dera Khasi Khan in Punjab. Frank was buried at Fort Monroe near Dera Khasi Khan in Punjab. And Gupta was going to India and to Punjab itself. Her brother was also buried in Punjab. So Mr. Gupta sent a letter to Maggie informing about his departure to India. Maggie came to Mr. Gupta's house and Maggie met him before his departure. She gave him a shilling to buy some flowers. Maggie gave her last shilling meaning a coin. And she asked Mr. Gupta to buy some flowers and to place them on her brother's grave in Punjab. Actually, Gupta knew that she worked really hard for the money. Okay. And offering that money to buy flowers for her brother's grave would give her a lot of peace. She was doing this sacrifice as a token of love towards her only brother. So Mr. Gupta took that shilling and he accepts the shilling and promised the little girl to place some flowers on her brother's grave. He lets the little girl have the consolation of placing flowers on his grave as a token of her sister's love for her brother. He also realizes that the girl will experience so much of relief if flowers bought by her own money are placed on her brother's grave. Therefore, he accepts the shilling. After she had gone, you could see Mr. Gupta wiped the tears from his eyes and went upstairs to pack his bags. Now just look at the title of the story. It's titled The Price of Flowers. What is the significance of the title, The Price of Flowers? Is it a correct title? The title of the story, The Price of Flowers, is very appropriate or apt because flowers express our emotions of various sorts. In our happy moments, they bring us joy, and on sad occasions, they bring us consolation. Flowers have no price tag. They express our emotional attachment, isn't it? Here in the story, Maggie is, of course, the central character of the story. And her brother Frank is a soldier posted in Punjab. Unfortunately, Frank is killed while fighting on the northwest frontier. He is buried at Fort Monroe near Dera Khasi Khan in Punjab. And his little sister Maggie wishes to place some flowers on the grave of her dead brother. Maggie wishes to place some flowers on the grave of her dead brother. Therefore, she gives Mr. Gupta, a narrator, isn't it? She gives Mr. Gupta a shilling, shilling. Shilling means a coin. She gives Mr. Gupta some money or a shilling of her hard-earned money to buy flowers. Mr. Gupta knows that Maggie is a poor girl. She cannot afford to spend a shilling on flowers. So he has got a mind to return the shilling. But later he realizes that flowers have an emotional value. He also realizes that the girl will experience great relief if flowers bought by her own money are put on her brother's grave. He therefore accepts the shilling. He lets the girl have that consolation, that solace, the happiness of placing flowers at his grave as a token of a sister's love for her brother. So it symbolizes the price she paid, isn't it? For the flowers. That shilling, the price of flowers, that's the title of the story. The price she paid for the flowers symbolizes her love, affection, sacrifice. And that was beyond all measure. The price of flowers, it was beyond everything. And hence the title is just and apt. The price she paid for the flowers symbolizes her love, affection, sacrifice, and it's beyond everything, it's beyond measure. Okay, that is why it's titled The Price of Flowers. So read the story once. It's a little bit lengthy short story, but it's very simple. Please read the story and prepare a character sketch of Maggie, Mr. Gupta, and Mrs. Clifford. Thank you, my dear children.